I'd like to start with is a quick look at the West Nile virus transmission cycle. This is mosquito-borne. It's vectored by a particular species of mosquito associated with the genus Culex, which can bite humans. Humans almost always are a dead-end host. There can be some transmission from humans, but that's rare. However, mosquitoes also bite birds, particularly associated with the family corvid and some others, a family called corvid. And the mosquitoes, this is an active reservoir. They can be, the disease can be transmitted further from them. Also can bite horses. That is also a dead-end reservoir. So we're going to talk a lot about the factors that influence this cycle today. Getting back to Wayne's comment, how does land use change and population increase affect the risk associated with West Nile virus? It affects it primarily in two ways, through water and also through forest fragmentation. For example, here, this is the changes that occur in a very simple hydrologic cycle as areas become more developed, as impervious surface increases. And I could call your attention to the box in the upper left-hand corner. This is natural ground cover, very low, maybe no impervious surface, where you have 40% evapotranspiration, 10% runoff. That little yellow box there is the one to watch as we transition. About 50% infiltration between shallow and deep. Now we go to 10, over to the right, move directly to the upper right, 10 to 20% impervious. This is would be the level you would see in a suburb with a lot of green space, not a lot of imperviousness. But still, you watch right away, the evapotranspiration has dropped a bit. The runoff, this is the critical one, has doubled. And so we've gone from 10% runoff to 20. Also, the velocity of that runoff has increased, and the pollutants associated with runoff has increased. Now we're going to the lower left, 30 to 50% impervious surface. That might be the level that you would see on a college campus someplace. Still not, heavily urban, but quite a bit of impervious surface around. Evapotranspiration dropping to 35%. Runoff has tripled. Now we're at 30% runoff. Again, velocity and pollutant levels have increased. Then we shift over to the lower right, 75 to 100% impervious. This would be what you have in the core of a large city, downtown Atlanta, for example. The evapotranspiration down to 30, the runoff up to 55%. So there's all sorts of problems associated with that in velocity, stormwater overflow, whatnot. Now this is setting up as we lose ground cover, forest cover, and shift to the development. This is setting up one of the scenarios that might increase the risk of West Nile virus. Some of the factors related to West Nile, what we find in these disease ecologies is that these things are very, very complicated. They include natural factors as well as socioeconomic factors. So in terms of habitat factors, you have forest characteristics. Again, this is affecting the risk of the disease through this hydrologic cycle. Also, forest fragmentation plays a big role in terms of bird habitat and some other things. Urban hydrology I mentioned. Corvid habitat or bird habitat is a very big deal. Socioeconomics, a big factor with West Nile virus transmission. Sometimes we tend to see higher risk in poor areas. For example, if people were not able to afford air conditioning in Atlanta, for example, they might tend to leave their windows open longer, which could increase the risk. The vector is this mosquito here, and so we're talking about mosquito habitat in the water and factors affecting that. So the study we did with the support from NUTFAC, which we're very grateful for, centered on Atlanta. We obtained West Nile virus data from the Georgia Department of Public Health. All the data I'm going to show you are from mosquitoes. A lot of sampling locations across 58 sites in and around Atlanta. We also, we have the West Nile virus data. Now what we're trying to do is predict risk. So we're going to we're going to collect other data in an effort to see what the areas with the highest risk of West Nile, what they look like in terms of vegetation, which consisted of estimation of structure and species, socioeconomic, census as well as field data, climate. There's a big climate influence here, which we delved into. Land use, land cover analysis, looking at things like forest patch size, that type of thing. And so there's a lot of people, a very highly interdisciplinary project here, about 6 or 7 principal investigators. And again, so the link between mosquito breeding sites, we had been told that prior to this study, there had been definite linkages between what are called combined stormwater sewer overflows, where there's an old engineering design where when it rains too much, the stormwater drains empty into the sewers, these overflow, and so you have badly polluted water in streams and what. Had been shown to be conducive to Culex habitat. Now we're coming in after that situation. Atlanta has been largely remediated to the tune of a cost of about $3 billion. So we're coming in after that remediation. And so that was a prime breeding site. Also containers in areas. We saw a lot of abandoned tires. Didn't know if that had an effect or not. Also, here's some of the, also poverty, a big effect, and here's one of the principal corvids, a crow. So the, the metric of West Nile virus infection that I'm going to be speaking in terms of is called a vector index, which is the average number of West Nile virus positive mosquitoes collected per trap night in a given location. A study area, was in Fulton, DeKalb, and Cobb counties in right around Georgia. And there you can see in the little insert there the distribution of our 58 sites. First, some climate data. Okay, the upper graph looks at the relationship between time, the period of the year, temperature, and precipitation. So if you look here, the dark line is the temperature line. You can see it peaking in about May or June there. Precipitation peaking a high one in May, also over in July. So you see the peak of the combination of temperature and rainfall about in May, maybe a little bit into June, July. If you notice, that precedes the lower graph, the peak mosquito abundance period, by about 2, 3, 4 weeks. And so what we determined was there's a lag effect between climate and mosquito abundance of about 2 to 4 weeks. And so I'll talk more about that in a moment. Okay, one of the surprising factors that we found was that there's a fairly strong correlation between the percent pine composition in forest patches and decreasing vector index. In other words, the greater the proportion of pine in a forest patch, the lower the vector index. Now, this is interesting. This has not been reported previously, and so it could be a number of things going on here. One of which may be, the first thing we thought of, well, obviously it's a bird habitat deal. And so maybe the corvids don't like the pine. That turned out not to be true based on investigations, review of the literature. The corvids seem to do fine in the pine. It could be related to with some other types of mosquitoes that carry malaria and Zika. Sometimes they are worse in deciduous forests because there's greater tendency for rot, for cavities in the stems, where you don't see that so much in pine. So the Aedes mosquito with the malaria and the Zika tend to breed in those cavities. That had not been reported for Culex, but nonetheless it could be a contributing factor. Also in Atlanta, the pine tend to occur on drier sites. Mid to upper slope ridge tops, the deciduous trees primarily in lower slope riparian situations where the moisture would be high. And so this could be, what we could be seeing here, could be a reflection of soil moisture and the tendency for water to accumulate or not accumulate. So not really sure of the driving factor here, but nonetheless that was very interesting. Now the strongest predictor we had was forest patch size. And so as the patch size increases, the vector index drops quite a bit. Now this was almost gratifying to see because this is called the dilution effect. This same relationship had been discovered in the northeastern United States for Lyme disease. The bigger the forest patch, the less Lyme disease you had. It had been reported in Louisiana for West Nile as well. And what we think is, what the theory behind the dilution effect is a biodiversity influence. In the larger patches, you have a greater array of bird species, perhaps, and so the probability of a mosquito reaching a corvid may be lower. Also, it turns out that the corvids tend to like smaller patches, scattered patches of trees with grassy areas in between, and you have more songbird types in the larger patches. But in other words, the pine composition and the patch size here are good takeaway messages for urban planners. We also have a strong socioeconomic link. This was census level data. The proportion of pre-1960 homes, older homes, as that proportion went up, the vector index increased. And so the proportion of older homes is obviously a surrogate for some other factors that could be happening. We have found in some areas, we did find this in Atlanta and some other cities we studied, that sometimes the infrastructure for water quality may be degraded if these older neighborhoods are, and so that, you know, could have worse water quality in these areas, which promotes breeding habitat. Again, they could be, you know, could be tie-ins with containers in the yards, open windows which let the mosquitoes in, but nonetheless, there's definitely a strong sociological linkage with the keylect. So the climate scenario that's most favorable for West Nile virus is a warm winter, allows the larvae to survive, wet early spring because it forms a lot of pools of water, dry late spring and summer because those pools of water evaporate and concentrate the pollutants and the carbon sources, and the mosquitoes like that. So in conclusion, we found that larger forest patches and higher pine composition are associated with lower vector indices. As the percent impervious surface rises, the vector index follows. Could be a hydrologic effect or forest fragmentation. Older neighborhoods and low-income neighborhoods associated with higher indices. A lagged 4-week moving average of soil moisture has a strong relationship with the vector index. Moisture more strongly than temperature, although the two are integrated. There's a strong need for greater detail in the metrics associated with socioeconomics part. We need to drill down there beyond the census level. And again, these results reinforce the critical need for well-coordinated interdisciplinary studies. They also had a very active outreach component of this project associated with Project Learning Tree, where our results were posted on the PLT website and distributed through their summer newsletter to 20,000 middle and high school students. We also did a number of presentations out and about in the Southeast associated with our results. So in summary, here's your perfect storm for West Nile virus. You have urbanization, increasing impervious surface on the left, followed by a very warm winter, then the presence of the culex, the presence of the corvids, blue jay being a corvid, and then you and your friends being outdoors a lot. That would be a perfect storm. West Nile virus is not a big problem every year. It's about a cycle of every 6 or 7 years. So unfortunately, it'll be back with us. So that, on that, I'll conclude our presentation.